Welcome, everyone. I'm Lisa Simon with the International Inbound Travel Association. We're so glad you could join us today for the first in a three-part series on technology and travel distribution. It's important for effective partnerships that everyone speaks the same language and understands each other's needs, particularly as we prepare for the restart of inbound travel. Today's session, A Perspective on Hybrid Travel Distribution, looks at distribution models and how they work. Our panel of inbound operators and hoteliers will discuss hybrid models of distribution and why they're important for building international business. The second session on June 22nd, Retooling the Travel Business for the Future, will provide an update on what's happening in travel technology and the importance of open standards for a seamless travel experience. The speakers will also discuss the integration of new health data in the post-pandemic travel system. Speakers will be Jeff Ernst Friedman and Stu Waldron with the Open Travel Alliance and Greg Land with IBM. The third session on July 6th will feature a demo of Open Travel's 2.0 open source standards by LinksRes with Ken Testani of LinksRes and Jeff Ernst Friedman with Open Travel Alliance. Before we jump into the panel discussion today, I wanted to remind you that you can find recordings of all of our previous webinars on connectivity and technology related topics in our Technology Resource Center on the website, along with a glossary of tech terms, which can be very helpful when we're trying to speak the same language. And just a few housekeeping announcements. The audience has been muted to avoid disruptions. There will be time for Q&A at the end of the session. You can post your questions in the chat area and the speakers will get to it at the end of the session. You're all pros at Zoom and webinars these days, so I'm sure you know how you can adjust your view to focus just on the speakers, but just in case, here are a few tips. Keep your video turned off and click on Hide Non-Video Participants, and then you should see only the speaker videos. You will need to be in gallery view to see the speakers. You also might want to exit full screen view so you have your chat on the right side of your screen. Now to get on with the webinar, allow me to introduce today's expert speakers. Moderating the panel is IITA's Secretary of the Board, Lena Ross with America for You. And our panelists are Quentin Blair, Blair Hotels, Elliot Calloway, Bonotel Exclusive Travel, Lisa Cully, BWH Hotel Group, Penny McNamara, Meeting Point North America. And we also have the presenter and trainer of our Steps to Success training program, Jennifer Ackerson of Alon Marketing Group, in the audience, and she will be inserting some color commentary from time to time based on her experience and teachings. Welcome to the panelists, and with that, Lena, I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Welcome, everybody. So we are here to talk about hybrid distribution. So we're going to start off with a definition of what it is. Hopefully. What is hybrid distribution? And this is kind of put together. We know that a lot of people have differing views on what hybrid distribution is, but for the purposes of IITA and this discussion, this is kind of what we're going to be using as the definition. So it's a combination between FIT rates, which are your classic static contracts, and dynamically priced and electronically served rates are through an electronic method. And markets need both of them to meet the requirement of the sales process. The travel trade creates demand and dynamic models react to demand. And we will talk about more of that as we go along. So we're gonna jump right in and again, feel free to post questions in the chat. I will be looking at it, and if there is time for me to answer it or if it matches what we're talking about, I'll go ahead and throw it in there. So definitely feel free to throw questions in there. So we're going to start with the first one, and we're going to start with our two buyers. Why is the hybrid distribution model important, and what are the benefits? And Elliot and Penny, I'll let one of you jump in and.
I can go ahead. It's really important because your static rates that are offered or classic contracts can go much further in advance, which gives us those longer booking windows. For example, during the pandemic right now, we're seeing like a record high of bookings over a year in advance, especially from the European markets, because, you know, it's like really like their birthright they feel to be able to travel and take their holidays. However, as the inventory starts to fill up, the dynamic model comes really, really important because in the past, hotels would just simply close out those static rates, and then you wouldn't have any inventory to sell. Also, with all the different platforms out there, we're seeing shorter booking windows. Don't get me wrong, like we still, through our traditional markets, have this really far advanced booking windows that provide your base, but we also have other opportunities where you can get those closer to bookings. And if we don't have any rates or inventory, you're just not going to get the bookings.
And can I add to that? I think one of the great benefits also with having dynamic to complement the static, because I think the two complement each other. People are upgrading, they haven't been able to travel for a long time. So when people are booking, they're often looking for a room type that we may not have statically, because there's, less inventory in that particular, like a suite product or beachfront. So I think people are looking to upgrade as they're traveling because they haven't been able to travel for so long. And like Elliot was saying, that, the great thing is that the dynamic rates will kick in once the static are maybe closed through high demand. But it also gives us a wider range of portfolio too.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So then the next question to Quentin and Lisa, how has the hybrid model helped your businesses?
Okay. Hugh, do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
You can go ahead.
I think the last couple of years, we continue our partnership and our commitment to the tour operator industry. And while some things have changed, some things haven't. We're still doing property direct contracts for all of our group, ad hoc, and series. And during COVID, there were a lot of people that couldn't get a hold of our hotels. So now we run everything through the BWH at distribution at bestwestern.com, and it goes right to the GM. So that protocol in the last 15 months has really helped hotels book into 2022, like Elliot was talking about. But increasing the hybrid business commitment, it really creates flexible pricing to reposition availability, rates, and inventory. But as we said, it also has all your room types online. Formerly, when we have static contracts, we usually have a queen and a king. And this puts your product on the shelf to be able to sell room types, all room types that you have available at the hotel in real time. And it's resulting in a more competitive pricing structure that is really beneficial to both parties.
Quentin, anything to add to that?
Yeah, certainly. For us, the hybrid model, which we're just akin to calling our business model, is something that's really built our business. We begin with the FIT partners and a static rate, and that allows us to build demand over the course of our season, which is very beneficial given that we have such a short season with such a very steep angle to it. It's all of a sudden season and then it's not. But we have 343 rooms, which represents 20% of our market. And being able to build that base with any kind of group business, whether it's motor coach or FIT business, is very beneficial to us to be able to capitalize on that transient business and maximize our rate earning potential. So we kind of go at it from the other end. We're loyal to our best customers, which are the group partners that we've been doing business with for 30 years, but it allows us to really take advantage of a short season and to squeeze the most out of it.
Yeah, and Lena, I just wanted, on the brand side, a lot of companies have aggressively discounted their offerings, to ensure dominance in the marketplace during the recovery. And that required a mix of rate plans, both static and dynamic pricing, to achieve the goals that people want. And tour operators remain really crucial to distributing these rate plans into the market and supporting desired business outcomes for everybody. What we did see throughout the pandemic, that there's been a noticeable shift among tour operators to embrace static and dynamic pricing approach. And a significant number of our operators and our partners recognize the value of investing in these technologies that help not only with client channel visibility, but also the segmentation of the business.
And Lisa, I mean, I think you and I have talked about this as well, but just because we're using like a technology platform doesn't mean we need to lose the personal relationship aspect of it. We can't just rely on the technology to work. We still need to have commercial conversations. We still need trade shows. We still need, these valuable organizations like IITA, and, really just making that personal point of contact. We've worked with partners that have just used technology and put a set it and forget it model in place. We'll talk to you when we sign your commercials next year, et cetera. And it just doesn't work. We've seen production dip significantly with that type of strategy.
And then, go ahead.
I just had a question. So can you speak to how it's benefited your contracting team, having both the static pricing in the brand channel and also in the dynamic pricing, and how you've been able to have those conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially through pandemic, where we've noticed certain markets where we typically haven't been nearly as strong as we have in the past, where we've really had to call on those hotels to make sure that, rates are being updated, inventory is available over their demand dates. And just really, again, to my point earlier, is just not losing that personal touch and that traditional way of contracting just because we have a technology platform. Because we've seen several times where the technology sometimes just doesn't work, and you can go days, weeks without ever noticing it, and really both of us lose business that way.
And also, when you guys are talking about static and dynamic and the electronic distribution method, you are using both of those types of rates through that method as well, correct, Lisa?
Yeah, it's been great. We have static rates in the connectivity in the brand channel, as well as a variety of dynamic pricing. And, just to be competitive in the market, from a promotional point of view, from an advanced purchase point of view, just depending on what the needs of the tour operators' clients are. All clients have different needs. I think as you see the restrictions lift, you'll see different countries having different needs and needing a different rate mix for that. And I think one of the successful things that we've been able to do with Bonatel and MPNA, just as an example, we did a lot of training through COVID together on educating our properties on how to use this and how they can benefit. So I think from a contracting point of view, we really wanted everything to happen at the hotel level for our properties so they could continue their relationship with the tour operator at the property level rather than pulling it back to headquarters. And I think this is something really significant and really different. And it doesn't separate the contracting process because that contracting manager still has the relationship with the hotel. They're managing. If they decide they want to do a promotion with a static rate, all they do is go into their PMS system and make those changes. It takes about 11 seconds. So it's really empowered our properties to actually work more closely during the recovery with our tour operators, our partners. That they've had for, in some cases, 20, 30 years. So I think it's been very positive.
And this is a question for all of you, but do you feel that the industry needs more education on the hybrid model?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Especially, and I think training is something that has to be ongoing. People come and leave. We're all going through major transitions. I mean, what we've been through with the pandemic is something we've never been through before. So it's all new territory. And the needs and demands of clients change. Our clientele has changed somewhat. So I think it's an ongoing thing. And again, going back to what Elliot and Lisa were saying earlier, that's where the relationship part of this is key. It's being able to pick up the phone and, the length of stay has changed. And it's really, really important to keep that ongoing training. Plus, we're all going through reduced staff, people on furlough, new staff. So I think it's more important than ever for the training to be an ongoing process for sure.
I think it's important, and especially in new markets, again, that we haven't been as strong as in the past, where you're really explaining what the segment is and explaining how to utilize the technology to complement the static rates, whether you're just using technology or you're actually issuing a contract that a Bonatel will load.
Gotcha, makes sense. And you, Lisa and Quentin?
Sure. Go ahead, Quinn. Go ahead.
For us, the short answer is unequivocally yes. It needs more. The industry needs more education on this. 15 years ago, my mother, who was doing the corporate sales and marketing job, she had a knee surgery, and I was her chauffeur up to Glacier National Park to discuss what she was doing back then with the regional hoteliers. And I've only just now found out that it was a hybrid distribution model. So certainly more education would be in line. Speaking with regards to the partnerships and the value of it, being able to have those conversations with my partners over the last year and through COVID gave us a huge advantage into seeing what we were going to see and what we were more notably not going to see, and allowed us to kind of fight and react accordingly, and to see the writing that was truly on the wall and not be caught gumshoe. So that was very important to us, and there is a lot of value in having those relationships. If we're calling it a hybrid distribution model, then absolutely the industry needs more education on it, and they need to get on board with it, because it's tremendously advantageous to your operations day to day.
I mean, this is something new in our industry, and I think it's still evolving. And certainly post-pandemic, it's going to require ongoing education. And I think, as Penny mentioned, one of the things we see in the industry, and of course, having 4,200 hotels worldwide and at least 2,000 of them in North America, you have a lot of staff changes. And as Penny mentioned, people on furlough, new people coming back, new people being hired. Education has been the key deployment of our leisure rate plan strategy. And we are one of the only chains with specific leisure rate plans that just for tour operators. And this inventory online in our brand channel is not shared inventory with the OTAs. So I think our commitment to this industry with having very specific leisure rate plans just for this industry shows not only the commitment for Best Western, but using that technology with multiple rate plans allows properties and operators more availability, rates, and inventory for their clients, and helping properties understand those opportunities are available to ensure that we have effective strategies in place to strengthen our partnerships and also make things mutually beneficial. So I think that's very important. And I know we have a lot of upcoming educational sessions at IPW this year, and I'm really looking forward to seeing some more of those things evolve. So.
Definitely. Jennifer, did you want to jump in and say something real quick?
Yes, definitely. Thank you. I think you all did a really great job of covering that. But as the teacher of the Steps to Success training program that we have in many destinations across America, this is an ongoing conversation. And a lot of times when a destination acquires all of their suppliers to come to the training, a lot of times it's more than half of the accommodation segment, right? So to every point that you made, but it needs a conversation, right? Because it's not just what is that and oh, I do it. And you have to really peel back layers. And when we were doing the pre-work for this session, I was saying that, like in New York City, where I teach Tourism Ready, you know, we'll go into hotels, and once we start having the conversations about how this can benefit you by looking at it from two windows, then all of a sudden the changes start to be made. So, you know, the education about it has to go on and on. And I think one other point that I would add there is that, you know, when you look at why the static piece is still needed, well, many places around the world are still doing package travel, and there's truth in advertising. So you can't have a rate that goes up and down, and it needs to already be included in that. And if you say no to that business, that's fine, but then you miss that entire segment. And I think at this point, we all need to have eggs in different baskets and look at markets for their value. And with the word value, then what's the value of our inbound operators and travel trade segment? So it's an ongoing, very long conversation. So I think we'll have education on it for a very long time. Thank you.
Definitely, definitely. And then we'll start with the Elliot and Penny, what opportunities do you see now and in the future in regards to this business model, the hybrid distribution model?
Again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, there's opportunities all around. I mean, we don't know what post-pandemic is going to look like yet for international travel. You know, we've had to adapt, and I'm sure it's the same for Elliot. You know, we've had to learn a lot more about the domestic market than we knew before. But post-pandemic international market, you know, like I mentioned earlier, you know, what we've seen from feedback, there's a lot of indications that people will book, you know, a higher category. You know, probably inventory that we haven't, you know, typically sold that well in the past. Also, you know, there are indications that people will travel with extended families, so needing a suite as opposed to a hotel room. So there's a lot of opportunities to upsell product by having a dynamic rate plan, you know, along with the static. There's a lot of opportunity to upsell, I think, which obviously increases revenue again. I think the demand is going to be great once the floodgates open. You know, it's not a question of whether they will travel, they will. So I think, you know, we know the patterns of how people traveled in the past, but again, you know, I think post-pandemic, we're going to see different travel patterns, different booking patterns, different quality demand, different types of product, different destinations. So I think, you know, going back to what Elliot was saying earlier, even product or destinations that we haven't sold that well in the past, suddenly there's going to be a lot more demand for. So I think a lot of opportunity for us all.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, some of our biggest successes right now during the pandemic, as far as new opportunities, have been in new markets. And, you know, we've worked really closely with Lisa over at Best Western and seen a ton of success. And when I sent her production reports in markets that we never booked in the past. And so, and then I think it ties back to education with those market leaders, whether it's CVBs or whether it's the individual hotels, understanding you know, how to not only use technology, but manage the rates and inventory so that we can book those higher room categories. And I think like it all really ties together what we've been talking about today between like technology and education.
Lena, if I can add to that, I think the opportunity also lies in, you know, the type of hotel or accommodation that you have, anywhere from brand properties and brand properties that have managed properties in different destinations, because the way you treat inventory in a city is very different than how you might treat it in the Midwest. So, and then a B&B who thinks that they can't be part of this absolutely can be part of it because they're not busy 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So I think it's having that conversation and explaining how you offset your volume business or your peak business and give them the opportunity, which again, we go back to education about, so.
Yep. And same question to you, Lisa and Quentin, opportunities and what you think the future looks like.
Okay. With our 18 brands, our tour operator partners remain a key distribution channel. They have for all the 20 years I've been here at Best Western. And the travel industry depends on our partners, our tour operator partners, for technology and inventory sourcing solutions for their businesses. And I think both static and dynamic offerings have really not only assisted in the recovery that Elliot and Penny were talking about, but offering multiple rate plans that are segmented by distribution channel is also very helpful. I think offering all room types with availability rates and inventory, it just makes more inventory available for your clients. And I think that's something very important. And just to touch on the education side, you know, throughout the recovery, we worked with a number of CVBs in training with our operators, whether it be, you know, with Bonatel or Meeting Point. And I think the marriage of this as we go forward through the recovery is exceptionally important. And it helps everybody understand what's going on in the industry. Obviously for BWH, our partners are the preferred distribution. You know, we don't want OTAs, you know, doing everything. We really value the partnerships with our operators. Some of them I've had some of these relationships for over 36 years. And I think that's something that's important. You know, we know success is better when it's shared. And I think that as we move forward, we're able to look at those opportunities and do some of those things together.
Quentin?
A lot of the discussions revolved around pre-pandemic and post-pandemic and during the pandemic, and those things kind of provide different answers when we're trying to answer the question of what opportunities do you see now and in the future. During the pandemic, it was a kind of a crystal ball. It was a way to see what we weren't going to have as far as business and what we needed to do to adapt and to remain above water and get through the tourism. But in a more typical season, pre-pandemic and I'm sure post-pandemic, it will be a way to really bolster demand and maximize the profitability for our short season and to really run at our operation at its peak efficiency. We have more of a chance to move that base to make up for some of those our additional inventory, and then really hit the transient market and the more dynamic markets with a lot more focus. So in a word, stability for us.
Yeah, and you touched on this a little earlier, but using the hybrid model, you're using your FIT rates to put your base and then create demand so that you can more effectively use your dynamic pricing, because that'll be more close in. Is that correct?
In a nutshell, yeah. We go to our group business, which we've had relationships with for 30 plus years, and we begin with that rate and we build from there. But we're able to charge the transient market. We're okay with doing it. We don't have any loyalty to the Smiths that didn't make their reservation and couldn't decide if they were going to spend the night in Jackson Hole or Cody. We sell the room for what the market will bear. But with our stalwart partners that we've had for decades now, it just makes sense to let them build our base so that we can go into the season armed with the knowledge of what we have sold and what we haven't. Where can we really be aggressive and push rates versus where should we utilize those other channels like the OTAs that can move a lot of discounted inventory, but at somewhat of a sacrifice when you're paying those types of commissions, especially as an independent property.
And a question for Quentin and Lisa, how far out is your average booking window? And I know it's kind of vague, but.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I mean, we saw significant revenue opportunities for different pricing models, dynamic, static, but the demand funnel, you know, it showed that we were sitting in the first quarter of the year where beaches, national parks, secondary cities were topping the domestic travel list, and the short lead times accounted for 40% of the business. So providing immediate operator opportunities in dynamic pricing to win the demand that was available. But it's also important at the same time we're looking at the wins that we have right now. We see it traveling from 40% down to 30%. And I think as we get into the summer, that will be even less. But throughout this whole year, we are also focusing on long tail bookings. In the fourth quarter, they've been extremely strong, and into 2022. We show extremely strong bookings into 2022, particularly in the first quarter, and likely that will backfill. And we see it being very, very strong in that area. But I mean, it was wonderful to provide dynamic pricing for our operators to take advantage of it. Because why do I want an OTA to take advantage of that pricing? I want my partner to have the promotional rates. I want them to have FIT rates. I want them to have dynamic pricing that's competitive in the market so they can win. And I think that's what we really saw during the recovery.
And we had another question, which you kind of touched on, but maybe you guys can just answer as well. Are you finding a higher percentage of booking within 14 days or outside of 14 days? And if yes, what percentage? You kind of answered it.
Currently, the market is kind of behaving a little irregularly. Typically, we would be seeing quite a few of our long-term bookings being made outside that 14-day range with the international borders, and that market being much more open than it is. There's a lot of uncertainty there, even though it is kind of starting to come back to life. Mostly that's been either cancellations or postponements on the international side. The domestic side is kind of shifted to the opposite, where it's roaring back to life, and it may be our proximity to Yellowstone as a gateway city. It's a very accessible drive market for a lot of people, so it could end up being a quick flight to one of our feeders or a drive or however, but we're starting to see more of that domestic within that 2-week booking window, more than we typically see, percentage-wise at least.
And I think we had about 30% of the bookings coming in April from 2 to 7 days. And then you have about another 20% coming in through the 14 to 30-day period. And then you have the long tail bookings coming in. And then it kind of backfills from the long tail bookings into the high season. That's what we're seeing right now. So in order to have our operators be able to respond, a combination of both the static pricing and the dynamic pricing has been really helpful.
Wonderful. And for Elliot and Penny, how can a hybrid model affect your clients' buying behavior?
Well, I think for us, as we've seen things change, like it's really about like a two-pronged approach. Whereas, having the static pricing for further out, we're seeing more bookings than ever due to the domestic market within 30 days. And so having those conversations with hotels regarding having the hybrid model is just vital, because if we don't have it, and we're seeing the majority of our bookings right now come within 30 days, we're not going to be able to give them any business because they more than likely close out our static rates. So their buying behavior they're going to go on to the next hotel or the competitor across the street.
I agree. And also to add to that, as Elliot was saying, with demand, typically the static will be closed out, with a short arrival window. However, the other flip side to that, there are destinations, outside of the beaches, outside of the national parks, that do have some need. And the other challenge we have sometimes is because everyone's sort of working with less staff now, with only static pricing, the turnaround to put an offer on sale, it's a much longer time period, where with dynamic, those rates can go on sale straight away and we can capture business. So it's a twofold. So there's a lot of advantages, again, to having the dynamic and the static. The other thing too, I've noticed too, is with hotels, again, people working with less staff, we're finding, contract renewals for static are coming in slower than normal. Also, we're backlogged, as I'm sure Elliot and his team are. So everything's taken slightly longer. The great thing with, even for the long-term bookings, having dynamic, because they're evergreen, already on sale for next summer, we're capturing bookings there too. So it's not just a short term, we're also seeing the advantage of long term while we're waiting for the static to come in too.
And both of you have connectivity with hotel partners, and you accept both dynamic and static rates that way, as well as contracting static rates, depending on how the hotel wants to go?
Well,
Yes.
That's one of the things I love with the connectivity we have with Best Western, because they're one of the only chains where we have both a sort of static tour operator pricing and the dynamic. Typically, on a hotel level, we will have a static contract in place and then have a dynamic through a channel manager or Synexis, and we will have that to complement. I'm a great fan of having both. It's not a one size fits all. Working with markets like Germany, who are very traditional, we need those static prices for price tariffs, etc. But having the dynamic is also very useful for other markets outside of Germany. The other thing for us where it's slightly different is that we're very, very strong in the German market. And as you know, with the German market, we have to offer the rates with resort fee included in destinations where there is a resort fee. So typically I'll have a static where the resort fee is billed to us. And then we have the dynamic, you know, if we only have those on sale, then we're not competitive in UK or Latin America, for example. Having a dynamic rate will then allow me to have a rate plan in place where the resort fee can be paid in resort, so we can cater to more markets.
And we also will load your traditional paper static contract. We have teams in our Las Vegas office that do that. We'll also work through, you know, most of every major technology platform. We also work with some hotels where we actually, similar to what we do with Lisa, Best Western, where, independent hotels that will load a static rate plan through Synexus and manage it that way. The only limitation though on some of the platforms is how far in advance they can push rates through technology. And even just because you have a static rate, say you can only go 360 days, you might lose out on those bookings that are, you know, could be 400 plus days out. So.
Are there any other technical limitations of electronic distribution that definitely push you towards keeping, again, that hybrid and doing both besides the early lead time?
Yeah, we'll see sometimes with resort fee issues, as Penny was talking about, inclusive, exclusive, because, you know, we sell to the German market as well, and that obviously creates a big issue. I would say the other thing is just making sure that it's monitored to make sure that you're having ARI, because you know, you could have, whether it's HBSI or Synexus, it could go down. They could have outages or API errors. Our system, you know, really needs very specific cancellation policies. So monitoring, you know, what the hotels are sending over to our technology team that's actually going to map it, because all that does is create a delay when you're trying to get things turned on and live.
Anything to add, Penny, on that question?
No, I mean, we have you know, again, with channel managers and working on a hotel level, it's much easier to maintain. We have some limitations in seeing what rates are available when it's sort of through HBSI, etc. With channel managers, with more sort of independent hotels, it's much easier to manage and see. But the limitation with HBSI is on our side, that we can't actually see the rates being fed through. So that would be one limitation, yes, for sure.
And one of the other ones somebody mentioned was that with the dynamic, it's much harder to change a reservation. It needs to be fully canceled and then rebooked if there's a change in date length and stuff like that. So there are still, again, those reasons why both are important,
That's
especially
exactly.
for the long term
Yes.
booking window.
I think that's why it's still important to maintain that relationship, because if we had that just through a dynamic or a static rate through the dynamic connection, if we still have a relationship with the hotel partner, there's a likelihood that we could call them and say, hey, they need to change the name from, you know, Elliot to David. Can you, like, without canceling and having to pay $500 more, they're more than likely going to do it and understand.
That's a good point as well. Anything on your end, Lisa or Quentin, with possible limitations or, again, reasons why one might be a little not easier to work with? That's not what I meant to say, but the benefits to working with both of them, I guess.
Yeah, I think for us, we have static and dynamic. So as Bonita, as Penny and Elliot mentioned, you know, it's great to be working with both rates in the system. And I think what's great about our connection is that it's 365 days rolling. So every day that goes by, you get another day in the next year, and it seems to work really well with the patterns we're seeing. And it seems to be handling the first and second quarter bookings extremely well for 2022. So I think that's positive. To your point on the cancel and rebook, yes, that is something that happens. But like Elliot said, I think by and large, the relationships that we have created at the property level it's not just a reservation coming in, it's a reservation coming in from a partner that they know, like, and trust. And so I think it breeds a much different response at the hotel level, because we have maintained our training together in many instances with our partners. The hotels are fully aware of how the booking comes through. And in the case that Elliot just illustrated, you know, they're able to call the hotel and say, hey, can you change this name from Patty to Steve or whatever? And I think those things are great. But I'm really proud to say for our 18 brands that, you know, people can book all the way into today of next year. So we are seeing very, very positive things. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the next question, you know, just what that visibility has provided. So thank you.
Perfect.
So I may be kind of on the outside of this one. For Blair Hotels, it really makes more sense for us to lean more towards the static. And I can tell you what works for me and what works for our company. I can't tell you that it'll work for other companies. And so if your company is different, which it most assuredly is, please don't take this as, well, he said. We're centrally located in our market. We have about 20% of the market. And when I say centrally, I mean we're smack dab in the middle of town in a gateway to a national park, that's Yellowstone National Park. We are going to fill. Our property is going to fill. It's a matter of how operationally viable we can be at full capacity, and group really helps us with that. And it's also a question of at what rate we're able to fill. So for us, when you alluded to, it's kind of backwards for me. We begin by taking all of our metrics and piling them in and looking at what the RevPAR was last year, and that's what we base our decision of where the RevPAR is going to move versus our group base rate. They're tied together and they kind of move together. From there, we're able to get our rates out in line with the market that the hotel industry is supposed to follow as far as appreciation and RevPAR climbs. And so we can kind of use that to rudder our ship kind of overall. For us, it makes a lot of sense to go with that static, because we have all of this built-in historical data and we have a program that works. We have rooms that'll ultimately fill. What we're able to do by offering static, we can get it out there to where they can book. You can book with us, and it takes these relationships with what Lisa said, people we know, like, and trust. You can book with us 3 days to a year from now. Just the same by offering that static. And yes, do I believe that there is a margin where I could make incrementally more revenue for my company by having more of those dynamic rates available? I do, but I don't know that it would be enough to offset the cost of channel management. So we, for now, just do it the old-fashioned way and upload our rates to the extranets and make sure that you have plenty of availability. It's not that we're not capable, it's just a decision that we've made for us. It doesn't make sense yet. And again, it goes to if my partner's on the other side of the table, if Elliot and Penny are saying, hey, Q, you need to get us dynamic here at the late booking window, then that's a conversation we can have. But to this point, it has been more a question of us having those static rates. And so that's what we've kind of based our model off of providing.
Wonderful, wonderful. And don't forget, please feel free to put questions in the chat box, or even raise your hand if you want to go off mute and ask something directly. I can call on you, that's fine. We've kind of gone through our questions. So is there anything else you guys would like to add? Lisa, you look like you were.
Yes. No, I just, through the hybrid model, I think we're able to strengthen our partnerships really in 2 ways. And not only did we see our leisure rate plans increase in visibility in multiple channels with our partners, but also with their clients. But this visibility in turn has helped them diversify their portfolio. And I think Elliot and Penny both spoke to that earlier in the session. And providing solutions to operators that address the new and short-term booking has been really important this year. And it doesn't mean that we're not focused on the long tail portion of the business, because we realize that that is the core of the business and that is equally important. But I think our continued ability to expand those offerings and make those offerings available to our partners not only ensures your recovery as partners, but it also as well as ours. And so I think that's something very important as we go forward. And we're all going to have to adjust to what that means, because none of us really know how that's going to turn out. But I think doing it together, like I said, is always better, you know, and we share those successes for all of us in the industry and hope the best to help everybody, not only our 4,200 hotels, but all the operators that are involved in the industry. And we're looking for solutions that just make you stronger. And I think BWH's commitment to the operator market by offering operator only rates in the connectivity, it's really unique to the industry. Nobody does that. And I think this really protects them from the OTAs. And I think this is something very valuable. And I'm happy to share that with you today. So thank you.
Wonderful. Anyone else with something to add at the end here?
Just to sum up, really, that, you know, what we're calling the hybrid model, I've always liked to call the rate mix, because it's having the perfect blend of rates. It's a win-win. It helps the hotel, it helps us. It allows us to diversify our markets more. You know, the static is great and having it in advance to build base business, but there are times when we need to react sooner in a shorter booking window. You know, we often talk about having higher rates available through dynamic in high demand, which is true, but there's also periods. For example, you know, Orlando in September is typically a tough month. Of course, we don't know how this September will look, but it's typically a tough month. And, you know, the hotels are often dumping rates so low via the OTAs. You know, again, if you have that base business in, you're less reliant on the OTAs, and letting us have you know, earlier on, another rate plan. It increases our ADR with that particular hotel. I mean, who doesn't want a higher ADR when you look at the mix overall at the end of the year? And also, I think there's something to be said about this. The two key things is, I think we're going to see a reemergence of the tour operator. I think they're more important than they have been. And COVID has taught us that, with people having to cancel, try to get refunds. You know, with a tour operator, they can actually get a person on the phone. They will get a credit. They will get a refund. So I think, you know, when international travel comes back, it's going to come back strong through the tour operators. But also from speaking to a lot of hotels, because they've relied so much in the last year on the domestic market and very, you know, last minute bookings, the clientele they've been getting sometimes hasn't done them great favors as far as, you know, TripAdvisor scores. It's a different class of clientele. So all of these things add into that part of the rate mix. And I think it's a win-win. It helps the hotel, it helps us, and it allows us to react and, you know, diversify our markets too.
Great. Yep. Good points, Penny.
I think the last thing I would just add, because I think everybody summed it up pretty well. Just if you have any questions or need any guidance through this, I mean, you can always reach out to, you know, Penny and myself. And I know, like, just from our team in general, we have some folks on our technology side that are a lot smarter than I am when it comes to, you know, working through Synexus and HBSI and all those. And they're always more than happy to hop on a call with me so we can work with your dorms or your hotels on how to figure something out if it's not making sense.
Great. And Jennifer?
I would just say that, you know, for destinations on the call and accommodations, it's really just figuring out how to make this market work for you, because I have seen it work for every type of property. And so, you know, we use the word partnership so much in this industry, but it's talking a lot about how you do business, because even the inbound operators are all very different in how they operate. And then knowing your need periods and looking at this as not displacing business that you have that's high end and with your dynamic rates, but filling it in to have business as much as you can. So it's really just going back and figuring that out. And it takes time and it's work, but it's worth it. And I love Q's example because it is exactly the opposite of how most properties look at this business. And so if he can do it, I know we all can do it. So thank you.
Wonderful. Anything
One
else?
more thing, Lena,
Yes.
sorry. Next week is the first of our 3 sessions on the pre-IPW, getting ready to go back to trade shows. And really, it's the Steps to Success program is the who, what, when, where, why, and how to work with inbound operators. And so any destinations on the call or anyone on the call, just come and hear you know, what we'll be talking about to get recovery back going for our country. And we'll have 2 different inbound operators each of the 3 times that we present the program. And Elliot, we'll see you on next Tuesday for that. Thank you.
Wonderful. So unless there are any questions from the crowd, which I don't see any right now, then I think that we're closing the session. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
Lisa,
Everyone.
Simon, do you have anything else to add at the end here, or we all good?
Great. All good. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and commitment today.
Thank you.
Yes, this was a wonderful session. Thank you all for your expertise and sharing that experience with us, and all of the things that you have learned new this past year during the pandemic. It's really certainly been a learning experience for everyone. Thank you, Lena. Awesome job facilitating, and thank you, Jen, also for chiming in.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks,
and
everyone.
also